Most men outside and inside the bulkhead. I want 24-hour visual contact with the console, Stewart instructed as he walked down a long metal corridor, Carson hurrying along at his side. Any change in the console's status, inform me immediately. Yes, sir, Carson replied, repeating the instruction into his communicator. Can I get you anything, sir? Yes, you can. Tea, please. Milk, no sugar. Stewart replied as they turned into a large office, interrupted immediately by a sudden gust of very unnatural wind. Carson looked confused, while the Brigadier merely folded his arms and allowed a small smile to appear on his face. Is there a window open somewhere? Carson asked, and the Brigadier chuckled as the outline of the large blue police box began to fade into being, the engines growing louder and the gusts dissipating. Carson looked up, and his jaw dropped. He'd never seen it materialize before. Before too long, the TARDIS engines thudded to a halt, and the police box stood in full in the corner of the office. With a quiet creak, the door opened, and a hand clutching a small china cup of hot milky tea crept around the side, before the doctor's head poked out alongside it. The Brigadier smiled openly. Doctor, is it you? He asked happily, as the Time Lord emerged from the box, the door closing behind him and placing the mug into one of Stewart's hands while shaking the other vigorously. Brigadier, how are you, my friend? The doctor beamed back. Already the emotions of seeing his departed friend began to well behind his eyes, and he quickly decided to drown it out. I must say, I don't think much of the decor around here. Your old office was much nicer. You've regenerated again, old man, Stewart noted. The doctor quickly analysed his friend's age and determined the last time he'd seen him. Judging from the lines beginning to show around his face and the tatty upkeep of the moustache he insisted upon keeping, it couldn't have been too long after their encounter with the Zygons. Old man? He blurted. Old man? Me? He glanced over at a small desk mirror. Do you think so? I've rather grown to like it. Been a bit too young these past few centuries. I'm much more dignified now. I'm glad to see you put on your Sunday best, Stewart said, his voice heavy with sarcasm, as the doctor turned back to him. He hadn't bothered to change in years. His deep blue coat was greyed and tattered around the edges. There was even a tear on the shoulder. His scarf looked like it had been dragged through a hedge backwards. His white shirt was creased, and a number of his upper buttons were simply missing, while his tattered waistcoat had no buttons at all and simply sat across his chest. Even his shoes were dirty. He paused for a moment. He hadn't had to impress anyone for centuries. It was all a bit of a shock. It's very chilly in here. Don't you have central heating in this place? He said, quickly changing the subject. This bunker has been empty for nearly 30 years, Carson suddenly spoke up. An old Allied recon post. It's not exactly been kept up to date. More recently, it's been repurposed to be a hydraulic power station. The doctor quickly whipped out his sonic screwdriver and gave it a buzz in the direction of the TARDIS. The left-hand door opened and warm air began to blow out. The doctor walked between the two of them, placing his screwdriver back in his jacket pocket and patting them both on the shoulder. I'll send you the bill, shall I? Now, what do you want to show me? I must say, Doctor, I'm happy to see you, of course, but I was expecting the other fellow, Stewart said as they walked briskly back down the steadily warming corridor. The doctor looked around to him, barely making eye contact before his eyes darted away again. You know, the eccentric one with the hair and the scarf. The doctor smiled. He liked that one. Anyway, it scarcely matters. Carson will tell you what you need to know so far. Who's Carson? The doctor inquired quickly, and the captain raised his hand slowly. Oh, right, sorry, didn't see you back there. Well, come on then, out with it. Sorry, sir, Carson stammered. Unit became alerted when the winter-like conditions continued into early June. We suspected some sort of weather machine, but none of our records indicated that a powerful enough device existed in this day and age. Winter started in late October of last year. The first snow fell in the last week of the month, and it's continued to fall for the last 8.5 months, with no sign of letting up, Stewart clarified briskly. The doctor was scanning his screwdriver around and constantly checking the readings. 2 months ago, we detected a spike in weather activity at these coordinates, and a survey team was sent to investigate, Carson continued. When they reported back, they said they had discovered a machine protected by some sort of energy field that made it impossible to approach. A full unit task force was dispatched, and I saw fit to call in the Brigadier. And you saw fit to call me in, the doctor finished, turning to Stewart. again making eye contact for the briefest moments before returning to his screwdriver. "That tends to be what one does when one feels out of their depth, Doctor. Call in the expert," the Brigadier said quickly. He had already noticed his old friend's odd behaviour, but for now he was dismissing it as being perhaps a quirk of his new regeneration. "Excellent decision," the Doctor noted, flipping his screwdriver and returning it to his pocket. "So, where is the old beauty?" Carson tapped his ID into the security pad, and the bulkhead before them began to slide open. Before it had even reached the roof, however, the Doctor ducked under it and hurried in, stopping in front of the large dome of energy before him, and once more drawing out his screwdriver and buzzing it around the room. The Brigadier entered the room behind him, standing with his arms behind his back and watching as the Time Lord stalked around the room, taking readings from everything. "Any time one of our scientists even gets close to this thing," he began, "they disappear and re-enter the room completely reset," the Doctor finished, glancing round. "Of course they did. This is a temporal displacement engine." The Brigadier sighed. He thought it would be techno-babble like that. "It's a device used to scramble time energy, the perfect shielding. It's lucky your boys went in for a closer look before just shooting at it. Lord knows what would have happened if a fired bullet returned to the gun chamber. Well, I know, it would blow the silly gun up." The Doctor continued to walk around the console, stepping over the wires and scanning them. "The strange thing is, the temporal displacement engine is just the dome in the glass. It's a completely wireless device." He buzzed his sonic on one of the various power cells around the base of the console. "That box isn't doing anything. Those wires aren't carrying any electricity of any sort of power, and this power cell isn't even plugged in." "Yes, that's all very interesting, Doctor, but what does it all mean, man?" Stewart asked impatiently. The Doctor straightened up and tossed his screwdriver back and forth between his hands. "It means this device has been deliberately altered and had bits slapped onto it that served no purpose at all." The Doctor pondered aloud, scratching the side of his head with his screwdriver. "But why? What's the point?" "Perhaps it amplifies the signal to increase the power of the storm," Carson suggested. The Doctor peered around to him. "The storm? Oh, no, this isn't creating the storm, not directly anyway," he said, as though it had been obvious from the start. "No, I'd wager the storm is some kind of after effect, and this is some sort of next phase. Step 2 of Operation Very Cold Winter." The Doctor walked away from the console, tapping his screwdriver against his wrist. "How many have you found?" Carson brought up his folder. 15, sir," the captain replied. "At least one on every major landmass, mostly in vastly populated areas, but there's no activity reported from any—" A low humming sound cut him off mid-sentence. The three of them looked around to see sparks of energy flare up around the console. The dome began to rotate within its glass bubble, the static sparking all around, arcing across the room and striking the walls. The Doctor quickly forced the Brigadier and Carson behind him and aimed his screwdriver directly at it. "Doctor, what in the blazes is going on?" the Brigadier demanded. The Doctor checked his readings. "The distortion field is activating," he called back over the noise. "We need to get all these men out of here. If that dome ruptures, we could all be displaced through time." Carson quickly called out to the guards to evacuate the room. The dome was spinning freely now, power surging all around them. The decoy wires and power cells burst apart violently, while the energy field began to expand out from the device. The Doctor twisted the spherical end of his screwdriver. It buzzed loudly and struggled against the expanding energy field. "I can't contain the distortion field. We need to get to the TARDIS. It's the only safe place." "Sir, reports coming in from all over the world. All 15 engines are active," Carson called over the noise. "It's a chain reaction," the Doctor exclaimed. "It's lucky I was already here. I would never have been able to land the TARDIS in—" He paused, and his face dropped. "Oh, no, 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 no!" His arm dropped and he sprang from the room. "Doctor!" Stewart called after him, turning to Carson at the bulkhead. "Seal the room!" Carson nodded and tapped in his code once more. The bulkhead slid down and sealed loudly against the cold metal floor. Stewart was halfway down the corridor by that time, and Carson bolted after him. The Doctor turned corner after corner, the whole time whispering under his breath. He could hear the Brigadier call to him. "Doctor, the temperature, it's dropping phenomenally fast." "Maybe the engine is creating some sort of storm surge," Carson called from further behind, and the Doctor could barely contain his disbelief at the captain's closed-mindedness. "It's not getting colder because of the storm," he shouted back. turning into the office to find it completely trashed, the desk upturned, papers and files scattered all about the place, and a large black square where his precious machine had stood. "It's getting colder because my TARDIS is gone,"